Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a story today that's really got me thinking. We're talking about those crazy wildfires ripping through Los Angeles right now.
Yeah.
The damage is unbelievable, and sadly, some folks haven't made it. The firefighters, they're doing everything they can, but they're stretched super thin.
Yeah, it's just devastating. And you know what makes it even tougher is that these
Yeah.
wildfires, they're becoming more and more common,
Right.
and not just in California either,
Yeah.
all over the world. Something we really got to keep an eye on.
For sure. And that's actually what makes the response to this whole thing so incredible.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of all this chaos, help has shown up from some surprising places. Canada and Mexico,
Yeah.
they're stepping up big time to help out LA.
It's really interesting, because
Yeah.
there's been, some political tension between the three countries
Well,
recently.
for sure.
But when things get tough,
Yeah.
it seems like they're putting those differences aside
Yeah.
for the greater good.
It's really something. So let's get into what that help actually looks like. First up, Canada. And they're not messing around.
Yeah.
They're sending boots on the ground, experienced fire crews who know how to handle these huge blazes.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just manpower either. They're sending some serious equipment.
Oh, wow.
We're talking water bombers, helicopters with night vision. Can you imagine the tech on those things?
Oh, wow.
They're even helping out with local incident command.
Oh.
It's basically like the brain center of a big disaster response.
Mhm.
They coordinate everything, make sure resources are being used right, and everybody's on the same page.
That's incredible. And it's not just a one-way street either. Remember those insane wildfires that tore through Canada in 2023?
Yeah.
The U.S. sent over like 2,000 firefighters to help them out. I still remember those pictures of the orange skies over New York City.
Oh, yeah.
All that smoke drifting down from the Canadian wildfires. It really puts the Canadian aid into perspective. They're returning the favor big time.
Yeah. It's a perfect example of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real sense of community,
Yeah.
a recognition that we're all in this together.
Totally. Okay, so now let's head south of the border to Mexico. They're sending a ton of support too.
Yeah.
Firefighters from their National Forestry Commission and disaster relief workers from their Ministry of Defense.
And the feeling behind it is really powerful. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said, and I quote, "We're going to help not just because the people and government of Mexico have always been generous,
Right.
but also because there are a lot of Mexicans in this part of the United States."
Wow.
It's acknowledging that deep connection between the two countries,
Mm,
the families, the communities that cross that border.
that's a really good point. And it's not just talk either. The Mexican consulate in LA is working hard to help Mexican citizens who've been affected by the fires,
Yeah.
making sure they've got resources and support during this crazy time.
It shows that this aid is about way more than just governments chatting. It's about people helping people, communities coming together to help those in need.
So here's where things get really interesting for me. All this support from Canada and Mexico is happening while there's some, let's say, lively political discussions going on between them and the U.S., especially with President-elect Donald Trump.
Yeah, the timing is pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've probably heard some of the things President-elect Trump has said,
Oh, yeah.
like renaming the Gulf of Mexico,
Mhm.
putting tariffs on things,
Yeah.
and even get this Canada becoming the 51st state.
It's hard to believe. You'd think all that talk would cause some serious diplomatic problems.
Yeah.
But both Canada and Mexico are putting any political stuff aside and showing amazing solidarity and goodwill.
It makes you think,
Yeah.
despite all the politics, there's a deeper connection that's driving all this.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if at the end of the day we all realize we're more alike than different.
I think you're right. Okay, but before we get too lost in the geopolitics of it all, let's come back down to earth in LA. This isn't just a symbolic gesture. This international aid is coming in when LA really needs it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thousands of structures have been damaged or destroyed, at least 10 lives lost, and big chunks of LA County are still under a red flag warning. You might not know what that means, but it means things are super dangerous for fires.
Right.
Hot, dry, windy. It's a recipe for disaster.
So this isn't about making a political statement. This is about giving real help and resources to a city that's hurting. These firefighters and aid workers are literally saving lives and helping people rebuild.
You got it. The help from Canada and Mexico is making a real difference, giving those exhausted firefighters in LA a much-needed hand, and providing crucial help to those who've been displaced or affected by these awful fires. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, acts of kindness and cooperation can shine through.
So we've covered a lot already, but there's one more piece of this I want to explore with you. It's about why they're doing this. especially with all that political tension we talked about. What do you make of that?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about how humanitarianism and global politics all mix together. Why are Canada and Mexico choosing to help even with those potentially strained relations? Is it just pure altruism? A sense of moral obligation? Or maybe there's some strategy involved? A way to build good relations and keep things strong even when there are disagreements?
It's fascinating. On the one hand, you've got this very real human need in LA. These fires are causing so much suffering, and it's natural to want to help regardless of where you're from.
But it's also true that Canada and Mexico have strong economic ties to the U.S. Antagonizing the new U.S. administration wouldn't be good for them. Helping out during this crisis could be a way to show they're willing to work together, even when they don't agree on everything.
It feels like it could be a bit of both, right? A real desire to help, but also a practical understanding of how important it is to have strong international relationships.
For sure. It shows how complicated international relations are, where good intentions and self-interest get all mixed up. It's not always easy to figure out why countries do what they do, but in the end, the result is good. LA is getting the help it needs from its neighbors. And that's what really matters.
It does give you hope, doesn't it? It shows that even in a world where politics seem to dominate the headlines, there's still a deeper sense of human connection that can win out.
Definitely. It reminds us that at the end of the day, we're all human. We all face similar challenges, and we're all in this together. So I'd love to hear your thoughts now. What are your initial takeaways from this part of our deep dive? What stands out to you the most?
Yeah.
What questions are you left with? Take a moment to think about what we've talked about.
What really strikes me is this incredible display of support from Canada and Mexico. They're not just sending resources, they're sending a message of solidarity, a reminder that even when we have political disagreements, we can still come together to help each other in times of need. It's a powerful message, one that I think we all need to hear right now.
Couldn't agree more. It's a reminder that in the end, we're all human. We all face similar challenges, and we're all in this together. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of this fascinating and complex issue.
You know, as we dig deeper into this whole thing, I keep coming back to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
These wildfires, they're not just a California thing, right?
Yeah.
It feels like a symptom of something much bigger, that we're all dealing with climate change.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now, it's just the effects getting worse and worse. Extreme weather happening everywhere.
Absolutely. The science is crystal clear on that.
Yeah.
We're seeing more wildfires, floods, droughts.
Yeah.
The consequences are just devastating. And the scary part is this is just the beginning. If we don't get serious about tackling climate change, these kinds of disasters are just going to keep getting worse and happen more often.
It's pretty sobering.
Yeah.
But seeing countries like Canada and Mexico step up to help, even with all the political stuff going on,
Yeah.
it does give you a little bit of hope. It shows that at least somewhere deep down, we know we're all in this together.
It does.
Mm,
It shows that even when politicians might be saying one thing,
right.
there's a deeper understanding that we're all connected. When something like this happens, the instinct to help seems to be stronger than all the political noise.
And it's not just about the practical help either, right? It's
Wow.
about the message it sends. Seeing these countries offer support, especially now,
Yeah,
when things could be tense, it tells you we're not alone in this fight.
exactly. And think about the ripple effect that could have. This kind of international cooperation could inspire other countries to pitch in too. Share resources and expertise.
Yeah.
Learn from each other. It really highlights how important it is to work together, especially with something like climate change.
Mhm.
It's not just an option, it's essential.
This whole situation makes me think about what's coming next. You know, if climate change keeps getting worse, we're going to see more extreme weather, more disasters like these wildfires, this kind of international cooperation, this helping each other out. It's going to become even more crucial, don't you think?
Absolutely. It can't just be a one-time thing.
Yeah.
This needs to be the model for how we deal with these global problems moving forward. We need to build on this, strengthen these partnerships, and come up with better ways to work together internationally. Not just for disaster response, but for dealing with climate change as a whole.
It's interesting, right? Because both Canada and Mexico are offering all this help, even though there's been some political tension with the U.S. lately.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder what their motivation really is.
That's a great point. It adds another layer to the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's this tension between what politicians are saying and this very real human compassion and this need to work together.
I'm thinking about some of the things President-elect Trump has said. Like, remember when he talked about renaming the Gulf of Mexico
Yeah.
or putting tariffs on things? Or even, I still can't believe this one joking about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Right.
It's so different from the cooperation we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it's like two totally different stories happening at the same time. You've got the political story, which is often all about dividing people and being nationalistic.
Yeah.
And then you got this story of human connection and people coming together, which seems to happen most when things are really bad. It's fascinating.
So how do we make sense of these two things that seem so opposite?
Hmm.
On one hand, you've got these politicians saying things that divide us, and then on the other hand, you see these incredible acts of people helping each other across borders. It's like a puzzle.
It is a puzzle.
Yeah.
I think it shows how complicated people are. We can be incredibly compassionate, but also really selfish. We can work together, but we can also fight. And how these things play out on a global scale is always changing.
So how do we make sure that the cooperation and the compassion win out, especially as we face these bigger and bigger global problems like climate change? It seems like a huge task.
It is daunting, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But I think it starts with recognizing that these problems don't care about borders. A wildfire in Canada can affect the air quality in New York City. A hurricane in the Caribbean can devastate coastal communities thousands of miles away. We are all connected, whether we like it or not.
So what does that interconnectedness mean for how we approach these problems? It sounds like we need to be thinking bigger than just our own country or our own political party.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to change our mindset from us versus them to we're all in this together. We need to start thinking about solutions that work for everyone, not just our own group. And that means cooperating,
Yeah.
collaborating, being willing to compromise.
It's a tall order, especially with the way politics are these days, but seeing these acts of solidarity and support, even in the middle of potential conflict, it gives me a little glimmer of hope that it's possible.
I agree. It's a reminder that even when things seem really bad, there's always hope. There are always people working to build bridges to help people understand each other and to find solutions that work for everyone. And that's powerful.
It's a powerful reminder that change doesn't always come from the top down. It can come from the bottom up through people being kind to each other, through communities organizing and working together, and through countries collaborating. Every little bit helps.
And remember, this isn't just about governments and big organizations. It's about each of us. Every choice we make, every action we take can contribute to a better future where people work together and care for each other.
So it's about pushing our leaders to do more, supporting organizations that are trying to make the world a better place and making good choices in our own lives.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves and that we all have a role to play in building a future where cooperation and compassion are just the normal way of doing things.
It's a lot to take in, but it's also really inspiring. It makes me feel like even with these huge challenges, we do have the power to make a difference.
I feel the same way. It's easy to get caught up in all the negativity and feel overwhelmed by how big these problems are. But stories like this remind us that there's still good in the world.
Right.
People still care about each other, and together we can create a better future. So I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts after hearing all this? What really sticks with you? What questions do you have?
Take a minute to think about what we've talked about.
So as we wrap up our look at this whole situation, I'm feeling kind of cautiously optimistic, I guess. It's been a real mix of emotions hearing about all the devastation from these fires, but then also seeing those incredible acts of support from other countries. It really shows you that even when things are at their worst, humanity can still come through.
I think that's a really good way to put it. You know, we've seen just how destructive nature can be, but also how resilient people are, and that's definitely something to hold on to. It is, but we can't just, feel good about it, right? We have to turn that feeling into action. So looking back at everything we've talked about, what are the big takeaways here? What can we learn from all this, both as individuals and as a global community?
That's the big question, isn't it? And while there's no easy answer, I do think there are some important lessons here. First off, it shows us that working together with other countries isn't just some nice idea. It's absolutely essential, especially with all these climate challenges we're facing.
But how do we actually put that into practice? I mean, it's easy to say we need to cooperate, but actually doing it is a whole other thing, especially when the world feels so divided.
You're absolutely right. It's not easy. It takes strong leadership, both at home and on the world stage. Leaders who are willing to put aside what's good for them politically right now and focus on what's good for the whole world in the long run. It also means building trust and having open conversations between countries, even when they don't agree on everything. And maybe most importantly, It means putting resources into the things that make cooperation possible, like international organizations that help with disasters, scientific partnerships, and those crucial agreements on climate change.
So it's not just about sending firefighters and aid when something bad happens. It's about setting things up for real long-term change, right? It's about understanding that these problems are all linked together and we need a bigger picture approach.
Exactly. We can't solve climate change without also dealing with poverty and inequality and making sure everyone has what they need. We
Yeah.
can't respond to disasters effectively without preparing in advance and building stronger communities. It's all connected.
It's a lot to think about, I gotta say. Sometimes it feels overwhelming. Where do we even start with problems this big and complicated?
I know it might sound cheesy, but it really does start with each of us. It starts with understanding that we're all connected to each other. It starts with expecting more from our leaders and supporting organizations that are working to make the world a better place. It's about making good choices in our own lives. Things like reducing our carbon footprint, supporting businesses that care about the environment, and speaking up for policies that encourage global cooperation. Every little thing we do adds up.
So it's not just about what governments and big institutions do. It's about each of us taking a responsibility. It's about understanding that we all have a part to play in creating a future where countries working together is just the normal way things are done.
Exactly. And what we've been talking about today is a perfect example of that. Yes, it's amazing to see the Canadian and Mexican governments sending help. But it's just as important to think about all the individuals who are doing their part too. The firefighters, the aid workers, the volunteers, all the everyday people donating their time, money, and resources to help those in need.
Yeah.
That shared effort, that wave of compassion, that's what really makes a difference.
It's a good reminder that even in the middle of tragedy and uncertainty, there's always hope to be found in how people treat each other.
And I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and maybe feel a bit more hopeful about the future.
And remember, even small actions can make a big difference. So let's all do our part to build a world where cooperation, compassion, and working together are the guiding principles. Thanks for listening.